My stepdad tore apart my adoption papers the day his real son was born. I got revenge by ruining his perfect family image. Now he's crawling back, wanting forgiveness. I found out my stepdad was planning to adopt me the same week he told me I couldn't call him dad anymore. My mom married Mark when I was 6. My biological father had died when I was 3, so I didn't really remember him. Mark swept in like a hero, charming, successful, and seemingly eager to be a father figure. Looking back, he loved the image more than he loved me. Mark thrived on praise. When people complimented him for stepping up, he'd beam and pull me closer. "This is my son," he'd say proudly. But alone, things were different. He'd get frustrated with my learning differences and say things like, "Your real dad probably would have understood you better." Then he'd apologize, and the cycle continued. By 10, I was desperate for his approval. I called him dad because he expected it. His parents barely tolerated me, always making comments about blood being thicker than water. Mark would defend me publicly, then privately tell me to try harder to win them over. The adoption conversation started when I was 15. Mark had gotten promoted and was riding high on his perfect family image. "I want to make it official," he announced, sliding papers across the table. My mom cried happy tears. I felt relieved. Maybe now he'd stop threatening to leave when I disappointed him. Then Mom got pregnant. The change was instant. During the ultrasound, he kept saying, "My baby, my actual baby." When it was revealed to be a boy, Mark nearly cried. "A son to carry on my name," he said, as if I didn't exist. His parents suddenly became grandparents of the year, bringing family heirlooms for the next generation. When I touched an old baseball glove, his mother slapped my hand away. "That's for Mark's son," she said. Mark just smiled. He knows his place. The mask slipped more often. He'd compare me to the baby constantly. "Jake won't need special tutoring. Jake will probably be athletic like me." When I got upset, he'd gaslight me. "Why can't you be happy for your brother?" Our weekend fishing trip stopped. The college fund meant for me became Jake's future. When I reminded him of his promises, he laughed. "You really thought I'd pay for college when you can barely pass high school?" That first Christmas after Jake's birth revealed everything. My stocking was gone. "You're 17. Aren't you too old?" Mark said, while Jake had 3 stockings. During the family photo, Mark positioned himself to block me out. Then came the STEM program incident, which was calculated cruelty. Despite my challenges, I'd worked harder than anyone to qualify for the STEM program at my school. When I got it, Mark was asked to be a part of the parent presentation. He said, "Why should I waste time promoting your mediocrity?" Mom begged him to reconsider. He showed up late, reeking of cologne. During my introduction, he made subtle jabs. Despite his limitations, he's done well. When he sat down, his phone got a notification, and he started tapping everyone around us and pretty loudly declaring, "My real son just took his first steps." I was shattered. So shattered, in fact, that my learning device shattered, and I started stimming from anxiety. Well, he grabbed my wrist hard enough to bruise. "Stop acting like an R-word," he hissed. "You're embarrassing me in front of people who matter." A friend recorded everything, including him in the parking lot telling his brother, "I'm sick of pretending that kid is mine. At least now I have a real son." That night, I found the adoption papers in his shredder. On his desk was a new will. I wasn't mentioned anywhere. Mom was deep in postpartum fog, and Mark weaponized it. He'd tell her I was acting out, jealous of the baby. When she defended me, he'd remind her how tired she was, how she wasn't thinking clearly. I spent months documenting everything. The family group chat where he'd removed me. The text about needing to phase out my presence at events. The family reunion was my chance. Mark loved playing patriarch, giving speeches about family values. I created a presentation showing how he'd used me for image building, then discarded me when he got what he wanted. My friend's footage was damning, especially the audio of him calling me the R-word. Mark tried to spin it. "This is edited. You know how difficult he is." Mom snapped out of her fog. "You monster," she said quietly. "You calculated this." She turned to me with tears. "Baby, I failed you. I'm so sorry." The divorce was brutal. Mark tried claiming abandonment. The judge reviewed everything, including records showing Mark moving money from my college fund to Jake's trust. During custody, Mark made one last play. "I invested 12 years in that boy. I deserve something. He's not a business venture," the judge replied coldly. "Though clearly, that's how you saw him. We may have won the fight for my college fund, but Mark was coming for full custody of my brother. I knew Mark would fight dirty, but I didn't expect him to move so fast." Within days of the divorce papers being filed, his lawyer sent over a thick envelope. Mom's hands shook as she opened it. Page after page of accusations, each one more twisted than the last. Mark claimed Mom had been emotionally abusive to me for years. He'd compiled evidence, photos of my bruised wrist from when he'd grabbed me, claiming Mom did it. Screenshots of my social media posts about feeling overwhelmed, reframed as cries for help from an abusive home. Even my learning device breaking became proof of Mom's violent outbursts. The worst part was a statement from his mother. She swore she'd witnessed Mom screaming at me during family dinners, calling me stupid and worthless. Complete fabrication, but written with enough detail to sound convincing. She even mentioned specific dates when she'd intervened to protect me. Mom collapsed into a chair, papers scattering across the kitchen floor. I scrambled to pick them up, scanning each lie. Mark had been planning this. Every interaction, every family event, he'd been building a case. Our lawyer, Sebastian, arrived within the hour. He spread the documents across our dining table, his expression grim. "He's going for emergency custody of Jake," he said. "Claims the home environment is toxic for children." I watched Mom's face crumble. She'd been so strong through the divorce proceedings, but this broke something in her. "He's trying to take my baby," she whispered. Sebastian pulled out his laptop. "We need to build a counter case immediately. Character witnesses, documentation, everything." He turned to me. "You said you kept records?" I ran to my room and returned with a box. Months of evidence, screenshots, recordings, even a journal I'd kept documenting Mark's behavior. Sebastian's eyes widened as he reviewed it. "This is good, but we need more." Mark's painting a picture of a long-term pattern. The next weeks blurred together. We gathered statements from teachers who'd seen Mark dismiss my achievements. My STEM program coordinator wrote about his behavior during the presentation. Friends' parents who'd witnessed his treatment of me came forward, but Mark escalated. He showed up at Jake's daycare, telling staff he was concerned about neglect. He filed complaints with child services. He even convinced some mutual friends that Mom was unstable, that he was just trying to protect his son. One evening, I found Mom in Jake's nursery, holding him while tears streamed down her face. "What if I lose him?" she asked. "What if Mark wins?" I sat beside her, watching Jake sleep peacefully. My baby brother, innocent in all this chaos. The thought of him growing up with Mark, experiencing what I had, or worse, made my stomach turn. "We won't let that happen," I promised, though I wasn't sure how to keep it. Mark's behavior grew increasingly erratic. He started showing up at the house at odd hours, demanding to see Jake. When Mom refused, he'd stand in the driveway shouting about his rights as a father. The neighbors called the police twice. During one confrontation, I recorded him from my bedroom window. He was pacing, phone pressed to his ear. "I don't care what it takes," he snarled. "That kid is mine. She can keep her defective son, but Jake belongs with me." The custody hearing date approached like a storm cloud. Sebastian prepared us meticulously, but Mark's lawyer was known for being ruthless. They'd hired a private investigator who'd been following us, photographing every moment that could be twisted. A photo of Mom crying in her car after a grocery run became evidence of instability. Me helping with Jake's night feeding while Mom slept became proof she was neglecting him. Even normal parenting moments were weaponized. 3 days before the hearing, Mark made his biggest move yet. He filed an emergency motion claiming I was a danger to Jake. His evidence? A video of me stimming during a stressful moment, edited to look aggressive. A statement from a child development expert who'd never met me, claiming my learning differences made me unpredictable around infants. Mom exploded when she read it. Not at me, but at the situation. She threw the papers across the room, then immediately apologized, pulling me into a fierce hug. "You're the best big brother Jake could ask for," she said fiercely. "Mark's just showing everyone exactly who he really is." But I could see the fear in her eyes. Mark had resources, connections, and a complete lack of conscience. He'd spent years perfecting his image as the devoted family man. Now he was using every bit of that facade to try to steal my brother. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Jake's future, about the choice between growing up with a mother who loved him or a father who saw him as a possession. I thought about all the times Mark had made me feel worthless, and how he'd inevitably do the same to Jake once the novelty wore off. By morning, I'd made a decision. If Mark wanted to play dirty, we'd have to be smarter. I started making calls, reaching out to everyone who'd ever seen the real Mark. It was time to show the court exactly who was trying to take custody of my brother. The first person I called was Mrs. Chen, my old math tutor. She'd witnessed Mark berating me for needing extra help, telling me I was wasting his money. She agreed to write a statement immediately. Next was Coach Williams, who'd seen Mark refuse to attend my track meets because watching you come in last isn't worth my time. By noon, I had 15 people willing to testify. Each story painted the same picture. A man who'd used a vulnerable child for his image, then discarded him when something better came along. Sebastian called that afternoon with news. Mark had filed additional motions, claiming Mom was coaching me to lie. He'd submitted photos of me at therapy sessions, spinning them as evidence of mental instability. The therapist I'd been seeing for anxiety, caused by Mark, was now being used against us. Mom threw herself into gathering her own evidence. She pulled bank statements showing she'd paid for all my school supplies, while Mark spent thousands on golf equipment. She found emails where she'd begged him to be kinder to me, and his responses dismissing her concerns. 2 days later, Mark's campaign intensified. He showed up at my school during lunch, making a scene in the parking lot. He told anyone who'd listen that Mom was turning me against him, that she was an unfit mother using me as a weapon. The security guard had to escort him off campus. That evening, child services arrived. The caseworker, a tired-looking woman named Patricia, explained they'd received multiple reports of neglect. She needed to inspect the home and interview us separately. Mom's hands shook as she led Patricia through our spotless house, showing Jake's well-stocked nursery and my organized room. Patricia interviewed me in the kitchen, while Mom waited in the living room with Jake. She asked about my daily routine, my relationship with Mom, how I felt about my brother. I answered honestly, explaining how Mom had always protected and supported me, even when Mark made it difficult. "The report mentions you have violent episodes," Patricia said carefully. "Can you tell me about that?" I explained my stimming, how it was a coping mechanism for anxiety, completely harmless. I showed her documentation from my doctor confirming this. Patricia nodded, taking notes. The inspection lasted 3 hours. Before leaving, Patricia pulled Mom aside. "Off the record," she said quietly, "I've seen this before. One parent trying to weaponize the system against the other. Document everything." Mark's next move came through his parents. They started calling Mom's workplace, telling her colleagues she was an abusive mother. They showed up at Jake's pediatrician appointment, demanding to see his medical records, claiming they had concerns about his care. The receptionist had to threaten to call security. I started sleeping in Jake's room, worried Mark might try something desperate. Mom installed new locks and a security system. We lived in a constant state of vigilance, jumping at every car that slowed near our house. Sebastian worked tirelessly, but Mark's lawyer kept filing new motions. They claimed Mom was alienating Jake from his father. They submitted photos of Jake crying, normal baby behavior, as evidence of distress. They even tried to subpoena my medical records, arguing my disabilities made the home unsafe. One morning, I woke to find our car tires slashed. The security camera showed a figure in dark clothing, face covered. We couldn't prove it was Mark, but the timing was suspicious. Mom called the police, adding another report to our growing file. At school, I noticed a man following me between classes. He never approached, just watched and took photos. Sebastian confirmed our suspicions, Mark's private investigator, looking for any behavior they could twist. I had to be hyper-vigilant about everything, knowing any moment could be photographed and misrepresented. The stress affected all of us. Mom barely slept, checking on on Jake constantly. I struggled to focus on schoolwork, my grades slipping. Jake picked up on the tension, becoming fussier than usual. Mark's strategy was working, wearing us down before the hearing. Then came the social media assault. Fake accounts appeared overnight, spreading lies about Mom. They posted edited photos suggesting neglect, shared fabricated stories about her violent temper. Mom's friends started receiving messages asking if they'd noticed warning signs. We reported every account, but new ones appeared faster than they could be removed. The damage to Mom's reputation was spreading. Some of her co-workers started treating her differently, wondering if there was truth to the rumors. Sebastian advised us to stay off social media entirely, but the damage was done. Mark had turned our lives into a public spectacle, all while maintaining his image as the concerned father, just trying to protect his son. One afternoon, while Mom was at work, Mark's mother showed up at our door. She stood on our porch, demanding to see Jake. When I refused to open the door, she started screaming about her rights as a grandmother, loud enough for all the neighbors to hear. I called Mom, who called the police. By the time they arrived, she'd worked herself into hysterics, claiming I'd threatened her. The officers took statements from everyone, including neighbors who'd witnessed her creating the disturbance. Another report for our file. That night, Mom broke down completely. She sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by legal documents, sobbing. Maybe I should just let him have Jake, she said. Maybe that would be better than putting everyone through this. No, I said firmly. That's exactly what he wants. He's trying to break you. I pulled out my phone and showed her the videos I'd been collecting. Mark at school, ranting to anyone who'd listen. His mother's porch performance, the private investigator following me. He's showing everyone who he really is, I said. We just have to make sure the judge sees it too. Sebastian called with a development. He'd found something interesting in Mark's financial records. Large cash withdrawals coinciding with each escalation. Payments to the private investigator, the social media campaign, even what looked like bribes to potential witnesses. This is good, Sebastian said. It shows a pattern of manipulation, but we need more concrete evidence linking him to the harassment. I remembered something. During one of Mark's driveway tantrums, he'd mentioned his brother helping him handle things. His brother Alex, who worked in IT and had always resented Mom for trapping Mark with another man's child. I shared this with Sebastian, who immediately started investigating. Within days, he'd traced several fake social media accounts back to IP addresses associated with Alex's workplace. The digital harassment campaign was unraveling, but Mark wasn't done. He filed an emergency motion claiming Mom had violated custody arrangements by denying him access to Jake. He conveniently omitted that he only had supervised visitation, which he'd been skipping to create the appearance of being kept from his son. The hearing for the emergency motion was scheduled for the following week. Sebastian warned us that Mark would likely use it as a preview for the main custody hearing, testing his arguments and seeing our evidence. Mom spent every evening preparing with Sebastian, going over potential questions, practicing her responses. I worked on organizing our evidence, creating a clear timeline of Mark's behavior from the day Jake was born. 3 nights before the hearing, our security system alerted us to movement in the backyard. Mom called 911 while I checked the cameras. A figure was trying to jimmy the lock on the back door. The police arrived quickly, but the intruder had fled, leaving behind a crowbar. The officer taking our statement looked familiar. As he was leaving, he pulled me aside. I was here last month for the driveway incident, he said. Same address keeps coming up in our system. You might want to mention that pattern to your lawyer. Sebastian was thrilled. A documented pattern of escalating harassment, all centered around custody disputes. He subpoenaed the police records, adding them to our growing case file. The morning of the emergency hearing arrived gray and drizzling. Mom dressed carefully in her best suit, hands steady despite the circumstances. I wore the only tie I owned, wanting to look responsible, nothing like the unstable threat Mark was painting me as. As we walked into the courthouse, Mark stood by the entrance with his lawyer, looking every inch the concerned father. He'd even worn a Jake's first Christmas pin on his lapel, a photo I recognized from the holiday he'd excluded me from. All this could have been avoided, he said as we passed, if you'd just been reasonable about my son. Mom didn't respond, but I saw her jaw tighten. We made our way to the courtroom, where Sebastian was already setting up our documents. The judge entered, and I recognized her from the divorce proceedings. Judge Martinez, who'd seen through Mark's manipulation before. Mark's lawyer opened with a sob story about a father being kept from his infant son, denied the chance to bond during crucial early months. He painted Mom as vindictive, using Jake as a weapon in her bitterness over the divorce. Then, it was Sebastian's turn. He methodically presented the evidence, the police reports, the harassment, the financial records showing Mark orchestrating a campaign to break Mom down. He played audio of Mark calling me defective and referring to Jake as his real son. Judge Martinez's expression grew stonier with each piece of evidence. When Mark's lawyer tried to object, claiming the evidence was prejudicial, she cut him off. Prejudicial to whom? Your client who appears to be stalking and harassing his ex-wife? The hearing lasted 2 hours. In the end, Judge Martinez not only denied Mark's emergency motion, but issued a restraining order. Mark was to stay away from our home, my school, and Jake's daycare. Any contact would go through lawyers. Mark's face went from red to purple. As we left the courtroom, he started to follow us, but his lawyer grabbed his arm, reminding him of the restraining order that had just been issued. We thought we'd won a victory, but Sebastian warned us this was just the beginning. He's going to be desperate now, he said. The restraining order makes him look bad for the main custody hearing. Desperate people do desperate things. He was right. That night, Mom's employer called. They'd received an anonymous tip about her substance problem and would need her to take a substance test. Mom agreed immediately, knowing she'd pass, but the damage to her professional reputation was another blow. The next morning, I found Jake's daycare in chaos. Someone had called in a bomb threat, claiming Mom had made it. The police quickly determined it was a hoax, but the daycare asked Mom to find alternative care until the situation was resolved. We were being systematically isolated, cut off from our support systems. But something something unexpected happened. People started pushing back. My STEM coordinator publicly defended us on social media. Parents from Jake's daycare started a petition supporting Mom. Even some of Mom's co-workers spoke up about the obvious smear campaign. The community was seeing through Mark's tactics, recognizing the pattern of abuse disguised as concern. Every desperate move he made revealed more of his true nature, building our case stronger than any evidence we could have gathered ourselves. The main custody hearing arrived faster than expected. Mark's lawyer had pushed for an expedited date, claiming the restraining order was preventing a father from seeing his child. Sebastian warned us this was strategic. Less time for us to prepare, more chance we'd make mistakes. The courthouse steps were packed with reporters. Somehow, Mark had leaked the story to local news, spinning it as a father's rights case. He stood before the cameras, tissue in hand, voice breaking as he spoke about missing his son's milestones. Inside, the courtroom was standing room only. Mark had packed it with supporters, colleagues who knew his public persona, church members who'd heard his version of events. They glared at us as we entered. Judge Martinez reviewed the mountain of evidence. Mark's lawyer went first, painting Mom as unstable, vindictive, coaching me to lie. He presented the edited videos, the twisted photos, the paid expert testimonies. Each lie was delivered with conviction. Then came our turn. Sebastian started with the police reports. 23 incidents in 4 months. The security footage of Mark's late-night visits. The financial records showing payments to Alex for the cyber harassment campaign. Bank statements proving Mark had drained my college fund while telling people Mom had stolen it. Mrs. Chen testified about Mark's treatment of me. Coach Williams described years of emotional abuse disguised as tough love. The daycare director explained how Mark's actions had traumatized not just our family, but their entire facility. Patricia from Child Services took the stand. Her report was damning. A home visit revealing a loving, stable environment being systematically attacked by an obsessive ex-husband. She'd investigated hundreds of cases, and this was textbook harassment disguised as concern. Mark's composure cracked when Sebastian played the audio recordings. His voice filled the courtroom, calling me defective, saying Jake was his real son, threatening to destroy Mom if she didn't comply. His supporters shifted uncomfortably, seeing behind the mask for the first time. His mother was called to testify. Under oath, her story fell apart. She couldn't keep dates straight, contradicted herself repeatedly. When Sebastian showed evidence that she'd been at her sister's in Florida during the alleged incidents, she broke down, admitting Mark had coached her. The IT forensics expert testified next. He'd traced the harassment campaign directly to Alex's work computer. Timestamps showed Mark had been sitting next to him during several posts. The concerned citizens reporting Mom were all fake accounts created from the same IP address. Mark took the stand, still trying to play victim, but Sebastian had prepared meticulously. Each lie was countered with evidence. When Mark claimed he'd never called me the R-word, Sebastian played the video from the STEM presentation. When he denied draining my college fund, bank records appeared on the screen. The breaking point came when Sebastian asked about Jake's future. What are your plans for your older son if you get custody? Mark's mask finally slipped completely. He's not my son, he snarled. I wasted 12 years on that defective kid. Jake deserves better than growing up around that. The courtroom went silent. Even his lawyer looked stunned. Judge Martinez's expression was stone. Closing arguments were brief. Mark's lawyer tried damage control, but the evidence was overwhelming. Sebastian simply reminded the court that actions speak louder than words, and Mark's actions showed exactly who he was. We waited in the hallway while Judge Martinez deliberated. Mark paced like a caged animal, his supporters having quietly left. His parents sat in a corner, his mother still crying over her perjury. 2 hours later, we were called back. Judge Martinez didn't mince words. Full custody to Mom. Mark would have supervised visitation only, pending completion of anger management and parenting classes. The restraining order would remain in effect. He was ordered to pay child support and restore my college fund with interest. But she wasn't done. She'd referred his mother's perjury to the prosecutor. The cyber harassment would be investigated as criminal stalking. Mark's face went white as he realized he might face jail time. Outside the courthouse, the reporters were waiting. But this time, they'd done their homework. Questions flew at Mark about the evidence, the recordings, his treatment of me. He pushed through them, nothing left to say. That evening, our house felt different, quieter, safer. Mom tucked Jake into his crib without checking the windows first. I did homework without worrying about being photographed. The security system stayed silent. Sebastian called with updates over the following days. Alex had been arrested at work for cyber stalking. Mark's mother was charged with perjury. Several of Mark's supporters had reached out to apologize, saying they'd had no idea. My STEM coordinator invited me to speak at a conference about overcoming adversity. Mrs. Chen offered to continue tutoring me for free. Coach Williams asked if I wanted to try a different sport, one where coming in last didn't matter as long as I tried. Mom returned to work without whispers following her. Jake's daycare welcomed us back with apologies and a new security system. The community that Mark had tried to turn against us became our strongest support system. 6 months later, Mark had completed his court-ordered classes, but hadn't requested visitation. His lawyer sent a letter. Mark was moving across the country for a fresh start. He signed away his parental rights in exchange for reduced child support. Mom and I sat at the kitchen table, Jake babbling in his high chair between us. The adoption papers were spread before us. Not Mark's conditional love, but Mom's boyfriend of 2 years, who'd proven himself through actions, not words. I signed as a witness, my handwriting steady despite everything. Jake would grow up with a real father figure, one who saw him as a person, not a possession. The cycle Mark had tried to perpetuate ended here.